Hi there, you're listening to Unnatural Selection, the show about newsy type stuff and things. My name is George.
My name is Tom.
And my name is Adam.
And with our powers combined, we are Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com.
George, this could be a camera trick, but that looks like a sizable glass of whiskey.
It's a news-appropriate glass size of whiskey.
Yeah, I mean, I free poured mine, but I don't think it doesn't even look like I poured that amount. I know
So
your
you
glass
guys-
is thinner, but
So
I
you'll
didn't
notice...
get the memo that it was a whiskey tasting session. What happened here, guys? Thanks for letting me know.
have you seen the news? Every day is a whiskey tasting
Sorry.
session now.
I know. I didn't watch the news actually. So
Oh, okay.
Fill me in on what's happening. What's
What does
going on? What do you
happiness
mean?
feel like, Adam? I feel you're now in the best position to answer that question. For me.
Happiness
Yeah.
is the knowledge that in a few weeks life will go back to normal.
Oh, that's nice. That's all my sweet summer child.
Yeah.
No, everything's awful.
What do you mean?
Yeah. Haven't you heard? I was under the impression that everyone had heard.
I heard what, Tom?
Victoria, as of this afternoon, is moving into stage 4 coronavirus restrictions.
Woo!
Woohoo!
We did it,
'Cause,
Victoria
the
number
real way to
one.
cheat is to lower your numbers.
Yeah, it's like golf. The
Yeah.
lower
Yeah, it's
numbers
like
are
golf.
better.
Yeah, low is better. Yeah. This is
All
a
right.
high score that we don't want.
Hold that thought. I'm going to get some news appropriate drinks and
Yeah.
then I'll come back. Hang on.
All right.
Feel
pad,
free
just
to...
pad.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Take the headphones off before you walk away.
Yeah.
I thought he was just going to stand up and fall over.
So
I've gotten out of focus.
Stage 4 coronavirus restrictions were announced shortly before recording today. So
Yep.
we can expect to be a good 48 to 72 hours before the first person finagles an interesting way to try and get around them, and it's widely reported in the media.
I'd say even less than that, because isn't it? Because part of the new restrictions was that most of them kick in really quickly. So I believe from 6 p.m. Tonight, we're recording this on a Sunday. And so from 6 p.m. tonight, people in metropolitan Melbourne can't, only one person from a household can go to the supermarket for your shopping. They can only go once in the day. Who knows how they're going to police that, but never mind. But, after 6 p.m. doing that, your shopping trips have to be within a 5K radius of where you live, all those sorts of things. And from 8 p.m. onwards, there is a curfew. I reckon we'll hear about stories of people breaking both those rules
Breaking curfew.
by
What's gonna
tomorrow
happen if-
morning.
What happens
It's
when-
gonna happen.
Yeah.
What happens when you break
right.
curfew?
Fines, I assume. I think it's similar to the other restriction fines, like the $1,600 or whatever.
You get to be on the 7 p.m. project. That's what happens when you break curfew. As long as
That
you do
too.
it in a public / obnoxious enough fashion, you get on the news.
Don't forget the Today Show. They'll have you on.
As I mentioned, we are recording this on the 2nd of August, or as I like to refer to it, the 154th of March in the year 2020. Things are getting worse. They're getting much worse, and they're not getting...
Well, here in
better.
Victoria,
Sure.
other parts of the country, some of them are getting worse, others better. ACT had no cases today. So.
I don't know how that's really going to be. People talk a lot about shitting all over Victoria, saying, it's Victoria's letting the team down. It's Victoria's are the ones, meanwhile, if you actually look at the documentation,
Sydney's on the brink.
We've had the best adherence to social distancing restrictions out of any of the states. We've just been unlucky. And that's the thing with this virus, is that if you trip up in just one or two areas and you get into a couple of clusters, it can spread exponentially. That's what exponential means. It's real quick. So
it's insidious and plays on our hubris.
yeah. So, I mean, looking at places in Queensland where people are posting on their Instagram stories, the people that I know that escaped to Queensland before the borders shut.
George, hang on, do you mean they changed their usual place of address to Queensland, or is their usual place of address already Queensland? What's going on there?
Just a bunch of people that I know that are just, I guess, now living in Byron. I don't know.
I didn't know all those people had property in Byron they could just go to. What are you talking about?
I don't know if they do have property in Byron, in New South Wales and in Queensland. It seems like a bunch of people have just fucking moved states all of a sudden without any warning. But it's so for all those people, posting on their IG stories, seeing them basically like not social distancing at all in Queensland makes me very nervous, because it's like, if you guys get an outbreak, you're fucked. Like, it's just going to spread exponentially, exactly like it did before.
Yeah, we're all Grandpa Simpson. It'll happen to you.
Well, it's funny watching the football, because they're having a couple of thousand people at each game. And granted, each block of ticketing is 2 or 3 seats apart. So, in effect, they are social distancing. You got to imagine that.
What about the line
in
for the
that
pies and
line
the
for
beers?
pies, the toilet? Yeah. There's got to be some crossover there, which isn't particularly safe. So it is, in some ways, as you said, Georgia, the kindling is there. All it needs is a match, and away we go.
It's one of those things like like today during the I was at the shops today. So the hottest new club to get into, obviously, as people might know, is Woolworths. In sort of anticipation of these stage 4 restrictions, a lot of people trying to get into the Woolies big queue. And do you want
to put the photo up of the one you we probably be able to, because it's on the computer. But
yeah,
the photo you posted today.
Yeah, probably not able to put it up, but yeah, it's on my Instagram. So if you want to follow me at George Tsipos, good Instagram plug at him, you'll be able to see it. But basically, you got this huge queue out the front of Woolies with people trying to get in. And some people are really good with the social distancing. Like the woman in front of me was a good 1.5, maybe even 2 meters ahead of me. I was very respectful, trying to give my distance. Whereas like the guy behind me, total piece of shit, was like right behind me. And I was like, bro, we're in masks, lining up for the Woolies. Like, surely you must understand something is amiss. Like, surely you must understand. I just wanted to turn around and be like, bro, are you fucking good, bro? Are you good?
Man, you would have an anxiety
attack. Are you fucking good, bro?
You would have an anxiety attack at Woolworths and Coles Balaclava, where social distancing doesn't really work.
The Coles in Balaclava, it's like it's a pandemic normally. Like when I had to regularly shop there, I think, Adam, you've said it before. Like, it's like the world's ending when you're in there at all times. Like, 100%. We're all panic buying to stock up before the bombs drop.
And like, I got in sort of early, and I think when I got there, the car park was half full. When I left, the car park was full. So obviously that rush just hit, because Balaclava, everyone's so drug fucked and hungover. Like, it takes them a while to get onto their next grocery shop. But yeah, like, even if there's no lining outside, they're just like, get in there and just figure it out.
Fuck shit up.
Yeah.
Yep. Get in, get out. Like,
fuck me up, fam.
Question for you guys. What did you think of the presser today? It was a long presser, hour and a half.
I think watching press conferences is actually like actively deleterious to my mental health. Like, I never come away from a press conference, one of the daily press conferences that Dan Andrews, our premier, gives about the coronavirus, and go, well, some good news. I feel pretty good. Good. I should go for a run. I'm just feeling great. Just feeling so good. I definitely don't want to drink before the sun sets anytime.
I got to the end of the bit about Metro Melbourne and was like, fuck, I better go now. And like, just went for an intense bike ride. But my point being is, you don't actually need to watch the full thing. It was an hour and a half. There's actually a cheat sheet that a gentleman by the name of David Milner, at Dave Milbo, if you want to check him out.
David Milner. Hey, yeah, he's a games journalist. Yeah, he's cool.
I follow him. He's great. For the presses, if you want to follow this.
Depressors, more likely.
If the press conference is at 11 a.m, it's not going to be bad. So all good. After 12 p.m.
2:30.
After 12 p.m, bad.
That's bad.
That's
bad.
Wearing a suit, real bad news. Sports jacket, moderately bad news.
I think the sports jacket is more like if it's like a weekend, he's in his North Face jacket, like that's
North Face jumper, casual. It's the weekend.
Yes,
right?
Okay, there you go.
Wearing a suit on the weekend after 12 p.m.
Oh, real bad. Yeah.
Real bad.
Will we say he was in a suit?
He was in a suit today. Yeah.
Well, I saw, like, because I guess I only saw him from top up, but he had like a checked shirt, unbuttoned collar, no tie, and wearing a suit jacket or maybe blazer. So I think we're bordering on the, like, in the attire, like, moderately bad to shit's fucked kind of territory.
Interesting that you only...
cheat though is bang on. I reckon.
Milbo has his finger on the pulse when it comes to just how news works.
There's a hashtag as well for you. Hashtag pray for the North Face jacket.
North Face is getting a lot of free media with Dan Andrews. I have to tell you that.
And they're getting out of this pandemic, they're getting the good free publicity out of it. Unlike Corona beer, which I don't think's ever going to recover.
Yeah, I think I think they suspended production, didn't they?
So I haven't been keeping up with it, but can you imagine imagine if you will, all this being over? I know, but stick with me. All this being over, can you imagine anyone ever buying a Corona beer in a pub again? I
like Corona.
Yeah,
I don't mind it too. It's a full strength but light, refreshing breakfast beer. But can you imagine anyone buying them without either people are just going to be too many bad memories, just the word gives us the bad memories, or it'll just be horrific jokes. It's like, hey barkeep, what can I get you? I'll have the Rona, thanks. Maybe whack me over with a bottle of that COVID-19 with a lemon.
There'll be a cocktail named after it. For sure.
The COVID-19, yeah.
I think it'll be a case where it's like one of those Western scenes where tall, dark and handsome stranger walks into a bar, the music's playing, he goes up to the counter and he goes, I'll have a Corona, thanks. Music stops. Everything, the hookers go, what's going on? And I'll have 5 Coronas, thanks. And then everyone just freaks out, stares down and just be like, ain't from around here, here's your boy.
And then they all shoot each other.
And then they just kill each other. Yeah, that's the inevitable conclusion to that
or it could be,
thought experiment.
Remember all those restaurants, we're getting way off track, but remember all those restaurants where you'd buy a bucket of Coronas? 6 Corona bottles in a bucket for $50 or whatever, they did, or
Mexican restaurants would do this sort of stuff. Yeah,
maybe free ad campaign for Corona beer here. If they someone comes in and orders I'll have a bucket of Corona, thanks, and everyone sort of turns to look, and it's like, don't worry, we're being safe, and you get the bucket and you slide bottles to each of your mates, and you're all sitting
socially
quite far
distance.
apart. It's like social distance. Be safe, Corona from where you'd rather be, or whatever.
I'm back.
Social distancing into their ad campaign.
I'm back, baby. You convinced me. Yeah. We are one ad away from doing just about anything, I think. We are one very good ad away from killing people. That's all it would take. We're so dumb. We've got friend of the show, Susie, writing in saying, if we've learnt anything from this, it's that people forget how far 1.5 meters is really quickly when in an enclosed space. Couldn't agree more. I don't know if it's that they forget or I think actually I've noticed some people almost making a political statement by standing closer. It's like, this would do something to prevent the virus. So
it's oppression.
I'm going to just be real close. I'm going to stand real close to you just to prove a point.
All right, Karen, calm down. Tom, I think, because there's obviously a curfew now.
Yes, as of 8 p.m. tonight.
And we were talking in our group chat before that the time, if we're all in our houses, is ceasing to be a thing. 8 p.m.
It's no longer defined by numbers.
It's not really defined by numbers. And 8 p.m. anyway, we hardly leave our house past that time. But
yeah. When did you last leave your house after 9 p.m. that wasn't taking the bins out?
My curfew, my effective curfew is basically 3 o'clock because that's the latest I've been outside of my house in many months. I've been under a self-imposed curfew this entire time.
Exactly.
So the question really is, to keep it simple, and we said this before in our group chat, is should you the way to define time is it coffee time or is it beer time? And if it's beer time, probably don't go for a walk or something.
Yeah, I reckon. Yeah, if it feels appropriate to drink, you've probably crossed curfew.
If it's beer time, why aren't you at home drinking a beer?
Precisely.
It's an excellent question.
And if it's coffee time, why aren't you at home drinking a coffee? With a puck at home.
I'm a big fan of keep it simple, stupid. I think that's a great way of doing it.
Back to what you said earlier when you said, how did we feel the presser went? The depressor. How did we feel it went? I think great in that sense. I know, there's been so many fuck-ups, particularly here in Victoria. Locking down the towers, the Housing Commission towers was just cruel and poorly handled.
It was done
but
badly.
in so many other aspects, I feel that like Dan Andrews is doing really well. And in the presser, I was just appreciating watching it. It's been like, this is simple. Like how he's expressing it. Like I get it. 8 p.m. to 5 a.m. curfew done. Like only one of you once a day for an hour.
But if I need to get an Uber, how many people can be in the Uber? I don't actually.
Something that's actually
just
been really shitting me as part of these press conferences is when journalists will go, but what about? And it's like, no, whatever you're gonna say, fucking no, don't do the thing.
I think it's important that those questions kind of get asked in a way. Like, I don't know if you guys follow the ABC Live blog. Like, while I've been doing work, I usually have it open just so when things happen, I'm aware of them. And part of that I appreciate is that people write in and ask, rather than at the press conference being like, Mr. Andrews, like all that sort of stuff, more like just asking the journos if they've got like quite a specific example. Like, you know, when the border went up for Victoria and New South Wales, when like someone who lived in Wodonga was like, hey, but I care for my mother who lives in Albury. Can I cross the border? And the journalists will be like, we'll look into it for you. And they ask the relevant departments and come back and be like, yes, you can in those circumstances. It's good to get that nitty gritty out. But in terms of his announcement, it's super simple. So I feel like doing it in that way is great because you can't say you didn't fucking understand the rules.
Right.
But Tom, what if I went shopping at 7:55 p.m. and then didn't get home, or it takes me 15 minutes to get home? Am I going to be in breach of the curfew, Tom?
Yes.
We've got a friend of the show, Ryan, writing in. When will Dan Andrews just start swearing at people in these presses? He has ridiculous patience. My kid doesn't listen once, and I want to scream. Yeah, I'd just be like, can we go to McDonald's if we're standing on our left foot? And Dan's like, no, you can't go to McDonald's. You can't go to McDonald's. You can't go to McDonald's.
It's why I really like his brand of like, it's like not swearing but still just being blunt. Like after that, like after, you know, the woman who went viral for the I've done all of Brighton, being bored walking her own suburb, that he then had a comment in a presser saying like, you know, stick to your own neighborhoods, all that sort of stuff. Is like, doesn't matter if you live in Brighton or Broadmeadows, being bored is better than being in the hospital.
Yeah.
And you're like,
disappointed
it's
dad
essentially
voice.
saying like, you fucking idiots. Like, I was hoping he'd go one further, being like, being bored is better than being dead.
Yes.
Motherfucker.
I do appreciate the slight cuntiness that
just
that accompanies. Yeah,
because and he said something today. I can't remember the exact quote, but along the lines of like the period where we tolerate this behavior, like we talked about last episode with all this questioning the masks, and all that sort of stuff. Like the time for tolerating that is done. Like he is done.
Good thing, I think, a good way he put some of it in terms of the loopholes. He said basically, if you have to think about it for longer than 5 minutes to try and find a loophole, the answer is no.
Yeah. And when he came out and said, stop looking for loopholes.
Yeah.
Like, he's like, yeah, I'm glad he's just addressing that head on. So, yeah, I don't know. I have respect for him, which is, good. It hasn't been perfect, but he's been doing well, I think, as to be expected in most avenues.
It's, as well as can be reasonably expected. I'm reassured that the Victorian government is full of competent people that are doing their best. I think the way that they handle their press conferences is mature. But that doesn't change the fact that things aren't getting better. They're getting worse. And we're having to institute another level of lockdown, which, like, I don't know about you guys, my mental health not doing so crash hot lately.
No.
And I don't know if I could, like, it sometimes feels like I don't know if I can really take this.
George?
Like, on an ongoing basis.
You got to restart Red Dead Redemption 2.
That's what it is. I finished Last of Us 2, and I was like, do I play New Game Plus with the flamethrower? Because I didn't feel like I really got to use the flamethrower. I got it in the end of the game.
Away. I feel that That game's heavy enough as it is. Kind of, I think I needed to not jump straight back into it.
Yeah, turns out in the middle of a pandemic, playing a video game which is about a post-apocalyptic world 25 years after a pandemic has ruined everything, which is deeply upsetting, and you play both sides of characters that are trying to kill each other. Not the most emotionally uplifting game that you could be playing right now.
And you need to be a cowboy. That's my point.
Cowboy.
You need to, go and brew your tea, pat your horse, all that kind of shit. You need to just embrace that to distract you from the overwhelming, crushing
existential
loneliness. Yeah, thank you.
How good was Red Dead 2?
No, it was good. I only finished playing it like 3 weeks ago. That's how big of a game it is.
I've been playing something that we're getting sidetracked now into. Let's talk about video games. But I've been playing lent to me by a friend of ours, Tommy. When I briefly saw him when I was allowed to see people, he was like, "Hey, do you want to borrow this?" And it was something I normally would never have had my eye on, the remake of Final Fantasy VII.
Okay.
And it's been a nice break because it's so fucking weird.
It's pretty weird.
Set in this really weird kind of, as my partner always calls it, camp. She's like, "You gonna sit down and play your camp game?" I'm like, "Oh yes," where everyone kind of like awkwardly goes like, at each other when like anything uncomfortable happens, and they have crazy hair. My character has a sword that's bigger than him.
Camp is in like it's camp, or a camp is in like I'm camping. Do you mean? I'm confused.
The first one.
Okay, right. Yes.
It's like quite like strange and all that sort of stuff. There's a character who I've only seen him the once, but he 10,000% wants to fuck his motorcycle. It's really weird. He it's this massive, like clearly phallic motorcycle. He rides around on it, knocking people over, and then he gets off it, and everything he talks about is like a metaphor for engines and like for the motorbike, and he keeps just like stroking it and going like, in that kind of Dragon Ball Z way of going like, and stuff like, just really exasperated sounds.
Japanese game?
It is.
Yep, that makes sense.
It's very strange. And when I talked about this online, a friend of mine said, she was like, "Oh yeah, my husband played that. Wait till you get to the massage scene. Make sure you ask for the full service." And I went, "Oh boy, I don't know what I'm walking into."
Tap X for the full service.
Yeah. Press X to pay respect.
But anyway, we're getting sidetracked here. So
we're getting sidetracked. But
get back to the news.
Friends of the show, Ryan and Susie, are jumping back in though at the end. Fall Guys is a game that Ryan has mentioned. Fall Guys will give us the happiness we all need. It's the PlayStation Plus game for August.
Oh, okay.
So if you have that, check it out. I know nothing about it, but I'm keen to check it out. And Ryan's endorsement, I trust him. He likes good games.
It's actually probably a good look. This whole probably crisis is a good point for anyone who doesn't play video games. Like in all honesty, it is good for your mental health. I think,
and all those people I know who are going like stir crazy at home, being like, I have absolutely nothing to do. I'm like, you have not discovered video games, clearly. Like, I look at my shelf, I'm like, it'll take me years to actually run out of games to play. So that's good. And Susie recommends playing the Angry Goose Game, as she puts it. It's called Untitled Goose Game, and it's fantastic. Made in Melbourne. Check it out. Can
confirm
good.
It's deeply strange and thoroughly enjoyable.
It's so funny. There's a dedicated honk button. That's all you need to know.
I'll notice actually that a lot of my friends, we've been getting into the 1999 computer game classic Age of Empires 2.
Yes.
That's made a resurgence, a bit of a multiplayer sort of like, civilization building game, real-time strategy game.
Are you a turtle player, George, or are you a more?
I'm a massive turtler. Yeah, for real.
Straight up.
Turtle. That's all I do.
Turtle being not the. Anyway,
turtle is when you. I don't know where he was going for there.
Do the fisting gesture?
There's the concept of like when you need to go to the toilet.
No, we're not doing that. Family show.
No,
so turtling is when you would build lots of walls around your little sort of empire and basically try and get your economy really up and going before you start on a military expansion.
Obviously in a non-COVID
situation. That, much like The Last of Us Part 2, feels like not the game to play during the pandemic because you're all like, I got to build up my economy and I just remembered the world and I'm sad. It's the same as Alice, my partner, has been playing Animal Crossing, which is all capitalism for kids. Is basically the game. Like, yeah, you start off, you get a mortgage, and you build your house, and you pay off that mortgage to the raccoon slumlord who runs your island. And then once you've paid off that mortgage, he's like, do you want a bigger mortgage? And that's the game. So she keeps saying like, oh, I've paid off my 3 million acorn or whatever it is mortgage. I'm like, is this just a game so people can like be excited for being good at capitalism? Like, because I mean, you know, Tom, social inequality is so huge.
If I could be a raccoon slumlord, I would be the happiest guy in the world.
Adam, you would make an adorable Tom Nook.
I don't know what that means.
That is the name of the raccoon slumlord.
Raccoon slumlord.
Yeah, I don't know if it's immediately apparent, but this is a news and politics podcast.
Well, speaking of social inequalities exemplified by people who may as well be raccoon slumlords, Donald Trump.
I just wanted to talk quickly, though. I just want to finish up on the COVID stuff quickly.
Oh, yeah, the Australian COVID situation.
There's a lot of, there's probably going to be a lot of anger around people that weren't doing the right thing, and that they're selfish, and there certainly were people that were like that, and I'm pretty angry about it. But one thing we should reference is that probably the reason why we've got here is to do with social inequalities in terms of job security, and the system, the capitalist system that we've set up and we've let go, and the free market will decide, that has, in effect, given us the situation where we are now, particularly in aged care, where the workforce are mostly casual and move around lots of different nursing homes.
This is the in a lot of Dan's recent press conferences, he talks a lot about this new supplement that they put. I don't know if it was new or if it was just sort of newly emphasized. But for those for whom, they're showing symptoms and they've been tested, you're supposed to isolate for a couple of days. And there's a supplement in place where if you need to miss out on work, you're eligible for this payment of $300. And if you are test positive and you need to isolate for 14 days, then you are eligible for a further payment of $1,500, I think. And basically him emphasizing that people should not go to work, obviously, if they test positive, and should go and take these supplements. That's what they're there for, to keep people going if they're not able to go and pursue
not
this work.
Dietary supplements, financial supplements.
Financial supplements, in case that wasn't clear. No, it's just a big scoop full of vitamin D. So essentially, but the reason that all of that is necessary is because we've created a casualised labour system that has put so many people at the bottom in such a precarious financial position that for them to forego one shift of work and forego that payment would be deleterious to their financial health. And that is that is our fault. We've allowed that casualization of labor to happen. We've allowed people, I think it was something like 50% of Americans cannot withstand a $1,000 emergency. And having that financial inequality, not having that, if all these people were full-time employed and had sick leave and were being paid fairly and had these other entitlements, it wouldn't be such a big deal for them to forego a few shifts worth of work. But because we've created this society that's like horrendously unequal in the distribution of wealth, because of things like work choices and casualization of labor and all this sort of stuff, we've now created a situation where during the pandemic, people can't afford to stay home.
Yeah.
And so they're still going out and infecting other people and prolonging the crisis. And that's really troubling from a systemic perspective. And I think hopefully, maybe if nothing else, maybe we'll get like a renewed sense of passion for the union movement and things like that, allowing a real workplace rights resurgence to happen. And to say, for these aged care homes where you've got one person working casually at 3 different places, to say if your business model doesn't accommodate paying one person full-time with benefits, then perhaps your business model isn't actually effective and it's actually being subsidized by the government to a degree, right? Because if people need to go have multiple different jobs in order to sustain a living, there are various different ways that they're probably also relying on government support or various other, government measures in order to stay afloat. So, maybe if you can't afford to pay one person full time to work at your place, maybe you don't have a business model, and maybe that's your fault. And
I think the point I made earlier, was before the show, was that there's a reason why Keynesian economics became a thing. There's a reason why the union movement was a thing back, whether even you go back towards the Industrial Revolution, right? There's a reason why there was a reaction against that, and why the 8-hour workday was a thing. And I think we've lost a bit of that.
Massively. I mean, I saw an article in the ABC the other day where they were sort of bemoaning the fact that there was farm work in rural Queensland that was going undone. I guess, the implication being that it was the fault of, JobSeeker and JobKeeper, that people, too fucking lazy to go take the jobs that were available. And I was like, but hang on. For those of you who are like free market evangelists, there is a free market solution to this problem, which is if people don't want to do the labor, you have to pay more for the labor, and then people will want to come and do it. So if your business model doesn't work under the current set of assumptions, that's the market working correctly. You know what I mean? Like, so, and the whole idea that the market is just like completely infallible under every possible circumstance is just like incorrect as well. There's just a base set of like neoliberal economic assumptions that we've swallowed wholeheartedly over the last generation, which is like, oh, the market's perfect, the market will work everything out. But economists have a phrase for when the market doesn't work correctly, or when the incentives are not appropriately aligned to the best outcome.
And that phrase is,
it's called a market failure. We know that there are situations in which the market doesn't work to the benefit of everyone, and we need to make corrections, we need to make regulations around that in order to best support what we want to achieve.
Sorry, George, I just want to hear that term one more time. Tom, if you could just give me that sound sample. What was that term called again?
Hang on, well, it's a little tricky to pronounce. I think it was
market failure, I think, is what we're talking about.
Market failure. Yeah, it's Tarzan for market failure.
Yeah, what did I say?
Market failure, but with an S. Market failures was the plural of market failure.
I always mix those two up.
It's
we
evidence.
Probably should leave that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No. It's just it's evidence that we've built a society that doesn't work when put under strain, and the coronavirus in this area and many other areas has highlighted the cracks in the system that were already there. And I hope if there's one good thing that we can take away from this, it's that maybe we can build a system that's a little more equitable for the people at the bottom, because in a consumer economy, if the consumers can't spend any money, it doesn't work. Everything breaks. So we need to make sure that the people at the bottom, the consumers, have enough disposable income to not only meet their needs, but also spend money, because then everyone wins.
And I think that's incumbent upon not just the people that are empowered directly now, but also our generation to try and make that happen, because it's not going to happen overnight.
No.
And look, I think
the powerful, by design, will not let it happen without a fight. It needs to happen through protest, through electing people who value these ideals, and pushing that legislation through. It's not going to happen. Scott Morrison is frankly just not going to wake up one day and go, I'm just really sympathetic to the union movement. I reckon people just have a fair go. No, needs to be, the issue needs to be pressed.
Yeah, and people to press that point, like, people kind of really need to, like, as we were thinking before the show, of what people are mad about getting us into this situation, for example, of like the extra stages of COVID-19. It's like, be really fucking mad at the KFC dickheads. But then I also see people being like, why the fuck did you go to work when you either had just had a test or you've been tested positive? It's like, sure, there may be dickheads out there who are all like, oh, well, fuck it. But they're probably going because it's a choice between still having the roof over your head or food. Like, they have to go to work, because if they don't go to work, they don't get their income. And as a lot of people are starting to learn, thanks to having to go on all these support payments and deal with Centrelink for the first time, that's a hard thing to go through.
Yeah. There are people for whom they are one paycheck or less away from financial ruination. Yeah. And until we solve that problem, you know, that there's the larger systemic issues, you're gonna keep having this kind of non-adherence, especially in times like this. This is just what's going to happen. People respond to the incentives that are before them. It's not their fault. It's not them being selfish or nasty. It's them not wanting to be homeless, and that's completely reasonable. Like,
and we can
wanting to be homeless. Fuck them.
We can see that there has been a slight pivot with the coalition government, but they're also towards a more left sort of subsidised Keynesian sort of, you know, movement, and they've been consulting with the unions and all this kind of crap, but
kicking and screaming
recently, you know, and there's been a question over Josh just this week before Victoria announced these stage 4 restrictions. Josh Frydenberg, some of the stuff he said was compared to being Thatcher-esque or Reagan-esque, and how do we manage this economic problem? Will we, you know, end up going back to that era of neoliberal conservative economic policy? Scott Morrison tried to hose it down a little bit to sort of say, we'll implement a method that's appropriate for our time. But yeah, I agree, George. I think if there's an opportunity to embrace modern monetary theory, to embrace social welfare programs that are going to be needed to stimulate the economy as well as save people's lives, now's the time to do it.
If not now, then when? If you can't spend money, like if you can't have fire hoses of cash during a global pandemic / economic crisis, then when can you? What is debt for if not for situations exactly like this? This is the point of sovereign debt, is like when you get into a world war or when you get into a global emergency, this is the point of sovereign debt, is that the entity of a country, hopefully, most likely will still be here in 100 years. Like the time scale in which countries have to pay off vast amounts of debt is very, very different to a household debt, or even, you know, one government's tenure in government. Like this is this scale of emergency that has literally never been seen before. So we need to do unprecedented things in unprecedented times to deal with it.
And I think the next 6 months will be very interesting to see.
Well, according to the press just today, Dan Andrews is saying, this lockdown, I guess, will be over by the time that JobKeeper and JobSeeker are likely to start winding down, which is in September. But like, I know from my own personal situation, both myself and my fiance Gracie are on JobKeeper. If that gets reduced to $1,200 a fortnight as opposed to $1,500 a fortnight, before tax, mind you, so that money that the government is giving you, a portion of it is going directly back to the government. So, you know, rebreathing apparatus, I don't understand how that works exactly. But we will be in a financial position where we are no longer treading water. We're actually going backwards. And that, like, we've got some savings, we've got some assets we can draw on because we've been very frugal. But a lot of people aren't in that position to start going backwards, and their requirements for their income are most likely higher than ours to begin with. So, you know, if a bunch of people, I don't know how you're looking to stimulate the economy. If you're restricting the amount of money that's in most consumers' pockets, it's just going to deepen that recession and prolong the recovery, the time it gets to, you know, for things to go back to normal. Tightening the belt is not what we need to do right now, and from all accounts, that seems to be exactly what the government is intent on doing. Well, even still from September.
That's the signals they've been sending. So we'll see sort of what happens.
Yeah.
But anyway, we've got a few other stories to get through. The world does go on, even as we in Victoria go inside and stay inside. As we said, as Tom mentioned before, Donald Trump has had some. As he does every week, there's been some news, you know, said a few things, just been a bit silly.
Just casually undermine democracy, you know.
Just casually undermine democracy.
Classic Donald Trump stuff.
And probably the biggest thing he said this week was that he said this on Twitter, of course, so whether or not, you know, he'll stick to suggests that maybe they should delay the election. It's very democratic of him, isn't it?
Can he do that? Apparently not.
No. The power to delay an election is held by Congress, so you need to get both Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House, and also Mitch McConnell, Leader of the Senate, in order to sign off on that before that would be allowed to happen. I don't see any...
The president of Georgia can do what he wants.
No, the president
actually.
The
that's
president
the whole point.
is not a king. That is the reason we have a president and not King George the 43rd.
Yeah, the gazillionth.
The best thing about this is that, like, all of a sudden he's got health concerns for people. Like, all of a sudden,
Here's
the health.
Here's two ideas. Everything needs to open up. The schools need to reopen. Vote-in, mail-in ballots are fraudulent, so you can't do that. You need to turn up in person to vote. So it's safe enough for everyone to do that in November.
Despite the fact that he voted by mail at some point.
Yeah. But so things are too dangerous for people to not vote by. You understand what I'm saying? It's too dangerous for you. It's not dangerous enough for you not to go back to school and to reopen the economy and do all that sort of stuff. But it is too dangerous for everyone to vote in person in November, and so we need to delay the election, ? I think he knew as he was throwing it out there in the quote. Have you guys got has anyone got the quote in front of them?
Hang on. He's got, with universal mail-in voting, and then in brackets, not absentee voting, which
Same
is good.
thing. Same thing. Both things, universal mail-in voting and absentee voting, are literally the exact same thing by definition.
And then he says, 2020 will be the most inaccurate, in caps, and fraudulent, in caps, election in history. It will be a great embarrassment to the USA. Delay the election until people can properly, securely, and safely vote? Question mark?
He's forgotten how fucking embarrassing the last one was for them.
Just floating the idea of casually subverting democracy. And just like, see how it goes.
Well, yeah, you know, you just slide it across the table. You know, it's the whole thing of like crazy thing, too crazy. Less
My question is, where is the well-armed militia? Where is the well-armed militia?
If ever you're looking for government tyranny,
guys,
if ever you're looking for government tyranny to overthrow, this is literally the time. Is when the incumbent president says, "Let's not have an election." Maybe that's the tyranny that you were looking for. That's what we're after.
You've been training for this for 200 years.
It's great because the militias are active, but what they're doing is they're going out to protests with the Black Lives Matter movement and just hanging out and just overseeing things. They're just overseeing things.
Just wanting to start some shit.
Just protecting history.
How do you rationalize that it's safe enough for the economy to open now, but it's also not safe enough to vote in person? Like, it can't be both of those things at the same time. Like, the logic is just...
He's an idiot. He's such an idiot. Anyway.
Yep.
So I guess no one took him seriously, but I mean, there was a bit of backlash to that. His poll numbers are cooked at the moment anyway, so that probably didn't do him any favors.
Even Republicans were like, bro.
No.
No. We're having an election. Tom's just headed off for a sec. He'll be back in a moment. So that's not great. But the good thing about that is he did receive a lot of pushback. Right? Yep. It's not like he proposed the idea and everyone was like, I don't know, let's maybe delay democracy. Let's see how you go. Like, it was like a resounding pushback on that idea. So I'm pretty happy about that. But doesn't bode well for a coronavirus election.
I've just sort of got to the point now where it's like anything on Twitter, I don't believe that is actually a genuine thing that will happen. It's just his brain, like farting. It's like just pent up ideas, kind of like gas. Mm-hmm. And then he just... if he doesn't get it out, then
Rachel Maddow says, "Don't listen to what this administration says. Watch what they do." That's the key with the Trump administration is to look at the restrictions that they're cutting down at the EPA. Look at their attacks on the mail, on the postal service. These are the things that they are actively actually doing. Like, Trump's rhetoric is almost like irrelevant.
It's superfluous, right? It's just like.
It's just him adding fuel to whatever culture war fire he can find in order to jingle a little set of keys over here while he actually, pardons his mates. with the other hand. Do you know what I mean? Like,
or people do it for him. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, because I guess there's the president being the president and just brain farting, and then there is the Republican apparatus or the government apparatus that's been set up now, operating really probably independent of a lot of the crap he's been saying, to be honest. They just sort of go, yeah, Donald, and they just go and do their own thing. That's, as he said, that's the thing you've got to watch, because that's the stuff that's actually effective in what it does, right?
The problem beyond Trump, say Trump gets, voted out in November, the problem then at that point won't be Trump, it'll be getting rid of Trumpism. Is now because these undemocratic impulses have now been sort of baked into the Republican Party to a certain degree. It's like, okay, well, say Trump dies tomorrow, Trumpism is still going to be around. It's still going to be a thing with which the Democrats will have to contend this election cycle, the next election cycle, probably the one after that. Like
that and the government offices, like the various departments that are set up. They're all now full of Republican Trumpites, right?
Toadies.
Because with the 2016 election, it was just a massive clean out. And then over time, they've replaced them with people that are able to cope with Trump's crap and also adapt it to various Republican purposes.
Or
the Supreme Court.
Or
the Supreme Court's a good example.
The fact that a lot of these organizations have just been hobbled altogether, like the State Department. There are roles still which have just never been filled by the Trump administration. People either were kicked out or resigned in protest, and the Trump administration has never replaced those roles. And there's a lot of people acting deputy understudy of the person who's effectively like running the department now, or running a section of the State Department, for example, that has never been replaced. So there's a real brain drain of competent people that are no longer in positions of bureaucratic power in the American democratic apparatus, and those people will need to be replaced. Like I think the first 6 months to a year of a Biden administration is really just going to be
get the system running again,
getting the system actually functioning again, getting the bureaucratic apparatus to a stage where it's actually functioning properly again. That's going to be the biggest challenge that they're going to have
because
to
Biden
overcome.
will want to hit the ground running, and it's like he's not going to be able to do that, right? It's going to there is going to be that time of like transition. So we'll see what happens with that. Just on Trump still, he had some other interesting things to say this week in response to a particular doctor that has been covered in the news.
So her name is Stella Emanuel, and she caught the president's attention this week after she was advocating for his favorite drug, hydroxychloroquine.
It's great.
Which is great for, it's a great anti-malaria drug if it's prescribed in the correct amounts. It's good for people who have lupus. It does, statistically, according to large randomized control studies, does nothing to help coronavirus whatsoever. But Donald Trump heard a woman who was wearing a lab coat saying the thing that he liked, and so he retweeted it and amplified this woman's perspective all over the world.
But she's a doctor, right? So she knows what she's talking about.
She is technically a doctor.
Yeah.
For what it's worth, she was not trained in the United States. She was trained in Africa, and believes a bunch of things which are not scientific. So, such as, that I want to get this right.
She's also a Christian pastor. So
she's a Christian pastor. She's got a
context.
very prolific YouTube channel. Says that hydroxychloroquine can be used to treat coronavirus, despite the fact that it can't. She also believes that... here we go...
that certain medical conditions can be blamed on witches and demons.
Yep. 5 years ago, she alleged that alien DNA was being used in medical treatments, and that scientists were cooking up a vaccine to prevent people from being religious.
If you're Christian, are you allowed to believe in aliens? I'm a little confused there.
As long as those aliens kneel before Jesus Christ, their one true savior.
Of course.
Well, I guess if God created them,
God created the aliens, and it was good.
And it was good.
Fantastic.
So obviously I just want to get this last one out because it was fucking crazy. Some of her claims include blaming medical conditions on witches and demons, Though she says they have sex with people in a dream world. Quote, they turn into a woman and they sleep with the man and collect his sperm. Then they turn into the man and they sleep with the man and deposit the sperm and reproduce more of themselves. She said in a sermon during 2013.
Obviously, she's got scientific data.
Normal doctor stuff.
Yeah. Did she fall asleep watching Rosemary's Baby? Because that's what happens in that film.
It's like that film.
I think she might have
Mother
coronavirus because that was a fever
Jennifer
dream.
Is that what Mother's about?
No, well, Mother's weird, but
I've
there's
never
some weird
seen it,
shit like that kind of
because I was a bit like, that looks a bit wanky, pretentious, and it's Darren Aronofsky, isn't it? But wait, it's about like subliminal demon sex.
It's basically about a fever dream, right?
Right.
And shit, it's very tense. Then shit just escalates. In the final act, it's like there's orgies and other weird shit.
It sounds like Rosemary's Baby meets Eyes Wide Shut.
Yeah,
I'm in.
I mean, it ticks a lot of boxes for me just based on
that.
Anyway.
So the reason that we're bringing this up is because, again, people I know in the world who we're supposed to treat as credible adults are actively posting misinformation in support of this woman. It was originally a story on Breitbart, America's favorite. Like, if you're too batshit crazy for Fox News, let's go to Breitbart. That's normally how that works.
The next station along.
And then it was amplified by America's Frontline Doctors, who is a collection of physicians critical of the scientific consensus around the COVID-19 pandemic. It was backed by, and this event that was recorded was backed by Tea Party Patriots, a conservative organization seeking to re-elect Donald Trump. So it's this weird, like, circular, circuitous Mobius strip of like a group that's like wants to get Donald Trump elected, that fund a thing that exactly aligns with Donald Trump's dumb, false point of view on things, so that hydroxychloroquine works. The group then publicly states these false beliefs. It then gets picked up by the conservative echo chamber ecosystem. And then Donald Trump sees it and goes, see, this is what I was talking about. They believe the thing that I believe. And so amplifies it.
Tweet, retweet.
And so, yeah, and it goes, so it's this circuitous sort of, Breitbart functions less as a news organization and more as like Donald Trump's toilet thoughts that they feed to him for him to amplify for them to get greater viewership. Like, it's this crazy
ecosystem.
That
habitat.
And people I know are promoting it, saying, and this is the thing that like really fucked me around about this, because it's like the logic of it is so like,
they're not promoting it necessarily.
Well, if you're promoting the story, which has been amplified by and this is the thing, is how quickly the story gets to these right-wing echo chambers that I don't understand, is that it gets in the news, it gets published in Breitbart, and I see the memes about it before I have even seen the story. And only then, after going back and doing my research, do I find the BBC article which sort of lays it all out. So it's like the misinformation hits me as someone outside of this echo chamber before the real information gets to me at all.
But that's memes, right? Memes do that. Memes their speed of transmission, if you will, is quicker.
So this woman is a black doctor, which is relevant because of what I'm about to say next. So based on it's got a screen cap of this woman, and she's in a lab coat, standing in front of some sort of monument in a capital city. And so because she's wearing a lab coat, I guess we have to believe everything she says. It says, them, listen to doctors. Us, okay. Them, not her. Them, elevate black voices. Us, okay. Them, not hers. Them, we need a cure. Us, here's one. Them, not that. And
I think I've also seen a similar sentiment of like, listen to women.
They said believe all women.
Us, not them. Like, not like that. Yeah.
Isn't that the straw man argument? Essentially, it's basically like all conflating two different issues, right? So you're saying that, this is a particular set of circumstances which you're using to spread your cause of, anti-Black Lives Matter or whatever you're trying to do, essentially.
Yeah, I just found it remarkable that someone could make a post that was both sexist, misogynistic, anti-science, and like pro-conspiracy theory, racist,
It's all
all
the
in the one.
boxes.
It's just like it's the the Breitbart bingo that he just played with that message.
But I think the reason why those memes are effective is because they're kind of funny a little bit, and people don't really know the full story around
and
the
this
context,
is the problem.
so they
It's
go,
easy-
oh yeah, look, obviously there's a point there,
It's
and I'm going to
easy
share it because
to share a shared Instagram story that someone else shared. It's easy for you to just pop that on your Instagram story or retweet it. It's a lot harder. It's only like 1 or 2 steps extra to just like do some basic Googling to see like what's the story behind this. But it just seems like that's how misinformation spreads, is because that tiny extra point of friction means that people won't do that, but they will, because it's almost too easy to share stuff on social media now. And that means that this false horseshit information makes it and then gets amplified by people who are supposed to be credible people. But if you spent 2 minutes looking into the truth about vaccines or America's frontline doctors, I know it sounds official. I know they're wearing lab coats, but if you actually look like any amount into it, you would realize that it's horseshit. And now I need to treat people in my life that are reposting this sort of stuff with respect still. I don't know how that's going to work.
Good luck.
you'll respect the diverse issues that are present in our society. Interesting on this point about conservative media and everything else. I'm going to switch news stories now because we're running out of time. I thought it was very interesting this week. James Murdoch resigned from the News Corp board, and I wasn't aware of sort of why this had happened and the context behind this, but essentially, you think of the Murdoch news empire, who obviously own Fox News and are responsible for a lot of this conservative think tank stuff, which has evolved since the sort of, mid-90s or whatever. James Murdoch, son of Rupert Murdoch, he's got 2 main sons. So is it James and what's the other one? Lachlan.
Yep.
James has resigned. And the reason essentially behind it is that he has, and in his letter, reservations about the editorial direction of that organisation.
Only now?
Yeah. So 2 questions. 1, in what direction does he think they're not conservative enough, or too conservative? Because I'm still not sure. 2, a full it's been a whole generation. Only now are you starting to have reservations about what?
Oh, I do remember there was a
direction that they're publishing?
story, maybe within the last year or 2. I can't exactly remember when it was, where he went on the record criticizing how Fox categorizes climate change.
Yeah,
the way it talks about climate change in a you're lying to people. Climate change is a thing.
So he's trying to be the good Murdoch.
Basically. And so I think a lot of people have taken your question, George, was the one I first had. And I think, Tom, based on the information you've said, which has been widely reported, people have sort of starting to understand that James, is more left-leaning than his family and the empire.
In which case, doesn't his departure strike a very unsettling note for the future of where Fox News is going to go if of the major people in the family who was pushing in the other direction is now no longer in the room? What does that mean for the kind of coverage that we're going to see from Fox News?
Exactly.
Yeah,
it's actually worse for...
That's bad.
It's good in the sense of, look, there's some objection. Great. But, exactly, all it does is just leave them to their own devices.
Yeah, now there are no adults in the room.
Just the rest of the board are sitting there being like, fuck it, bye.
Yeah.
And whether or not James was pushed out by the family or whatever, I'm not sure. It doesn't really matter. But I think the end result of that is actually worse off than you would read if you first read that headline.
Actually, now that you say that, I do remember, and I don't know how much the show was necessarily based on, fact, but the show about Roger Ailes, The Loudest Voice, which is sort of like a limited series with Russell Crowe and a bunch, really good show. I quite recommend it. Sort of documenting Roger Ailes as the founder of Fox News, his sort of rise to fame and then fall, does have a section where he's at loggerhead. Roger Ailes is very conservative, wants to go further, wants to to push harder on this like hyper conservative agenda, and the show makes it clear that he knows he's not telling the truth. Like it really is just like a cynical ploy to push their side of things. And
the other movie,
and
really
he was
that
at loggerheads at certain points during that show with Murdoch's kids and sort of their sort of creeping influence over Rupert Murdoch as they got older and things like that. So, you know, maybe it is the case that the younger generation of Murdochs aren't necessarily as on board with the direction of the company, but at a, like, yeah, I don't know. At a certain point, you got to, I don't know. I'm kind of over hoping for the best out of people. They're like, oh, one day they'll inherit the empire and make it, you know, a force for good. It's like, no, I don't think that's going to happen. I don't hold out hope for that.
I was just going to quickly say that the other good film about that sort of environment is Bombshell in 2019. About really good film. So check that out as well.
I need to watch that. I heard that was good.
But yeah, I think all this does is increase the echo chamber that you spoke about before, George. If anything,
imagine feeling as though Fox News wasn't conservative enough, like to think that, you know, like Breitbart, and thanks to, you know, Donald Trump and his amplification of these far right enterprises like Breitbart and InfoWars, like Donald Trump has been on Alex Jones's show multiple times, like thanking him for his help during the 2016 election. Like, these aren't outliers. This is a central part of the propaganda apparatus, is relying on established misinformation channels, essentially. Like Alex Jones really is a huckster. Like, there really is no way around it.
If you want to see a good analogy of that, a Homeland, or good sort of pop culture take of it, Homeland season 6 or 7,
somewhere around there,
covers a character that's basically Alex Jones. He even has the same voice.
He does the voice, yeah. What's his name? Was it David Arquette?
Arquette, I think. I think that's him. Yeah, I think it's David Arquette.
I haven't seen Homeland.
Anyway, basically there's a character that plays that sort of Alex Jones type character, and the way that interfaces with, I mean, they basically frame it as a conspiracy by the conservative apparatus.
No, it wasn't David Arquette. It was someone else. It's the guy who plays the in the show Medium, her husband.
Yeah,
Patricia Arquette. That's probably why I'm thinking of Arquette.
It is David Arquette, isn't it?
I don't think so. Her husband in the show, not in real life.
Right, I see what you're saying. Yeah, but anyway, my point being is that if you want to see sort of a dramatic representation of how that apparatus could work or has worked, or in a vague way, that's an interesting example, or an entertaining example, if you will. If not, perhaps, you know, heavily fictionalized and blown out of proportion. But it gives you an example of the worst case scenario. Do we? I don't know how to finish the show now because it's all just so bleak. I guess some good news. I'll just quickly finish on this.
Friend of the show, Susie's writing in. I feel like if there was ever an Unnatural Selection bingo game, one of the squares would be Adam brings up Homeland.
I love Homeland. It's such a good show.
It's a good show. I'm sad that it's over.
I just want to quickly touch on, and I don't want to comment too much on it because I'm not in a position to really comment too much on it. And I think it is some vaguely good news. There's an announcement this week by the federal government that they've, in consultation with the some of the Coalition of the Peaks, which is sort of a representative body of Indigenous communities, they've basically drafted up an agreement which updates the Closing the Gap arrangement from 2008, resets the targets, and hopefully the concept is it'll be much more effectively in closing the gap. Now, whether or not that is an effective piece of an effective agreement, whether or not it's actually what Aboriginal communities need or want, I'm not sure. I'm not really in a position to comment on that. But one thing I did want to say was that I think the timing of this agreement and the way it's been framed, I think, shows that the Black Lives Matter movement has been somewhat effective in Australia. They may have already been working on this anyway before all this happened, but I think it shows that the protesting and the democratic process of that, I think, is effective in some ways in terms of the timing again of this agreement and the way it was brought out.
In the words of the recently deceased Democratic representative John Lewis, who was there during the march in Selma, as he said, you have to get into good trouble. And you know, the Black Lives Matter protests, you know, whilst you don't need to necessarily agree with everything that every extremist part of every organization talks about, but certainly I think we can all agree that having Black Lives Matter as a central part of the dialogue has moved the needle in a meaningful way, not just in America in how we deal with race, but also in places here like Australia. I think this is an example of that. I think Kamala Harris is slated to be Joe Biden's vice presidential nominee. We'll find out this week. And I think part of that decision, you know, he said he was going to have a woman as his vice president. And I think the fact that she is a black woman and is a former prosecutor and has got a law enforcement background, I think all of these things like factor into the current moment in a way that would not be the case if the George Floyd protest hadn't happened. So all of which is a long roundabout way of saying like protest works. And when we're allowed to be in the street again, protesting for climate change, protesting for social justice, protesting for a fair labor movement that decreases the casualisation of labor, these are all worthy endeavours and we should all pursue them because it makes a difference. It works. Protest works.
When we're not in a state of disaster.
When we are not in a literal quote state of disaster, then, you know, then we can do all this stuff.
But yeah, so I think there's hope for the future. Keep sinking beers in the meantime.
Ever so a slight glimmer of hope. Yeah.
And on that note.
We have been, we are, and we always will be Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com. Make sure you follow us on all social medias that have, do, or ever will exist. That's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and motherfucking TikTok while it's still around if Donald Trump hasn't banned it, at Unnatural Show. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at George Tsipos.
You can follow me on Twitter at Tom D. Heath.
And you can follow me on Instagram at AC Doreen, although I'm not posting much at the moment because I'm stuck inside. But
mate, you've got nothing but time.
You've got nothing but time to post.
I need to be creative.
I expect to see a lot of cat posts. I expect to see a lot of throwback posts. I need, you know, maybe some home workouts. Fucking get onto it, Adam.
I need to embrace my creativity. I've got the theatre background. I should be able to handle this. So watch this space.
Maybe a lip sync version of a famous movie scene that you've obviously spent several hours preparing. How about that?
It's definitely an original idea, George, that you've just proposed, and definitely hasn't been done before.
Thank you. I think so too. Thanks for listening, guys. We love your faces. Appreciate you watching live. We'll see you next week.